Hey everybody, we're live. This is Brita from the Firehose project, and we have Ken joining us as well. We're joining remotely today. This is Ken, our CTO and co-founder, and we're really excited to talk to you today about the technical interview. I know a lot of people have questions about this and kind of what it entails, how it differs from a normal interview, and how you can best prepare. So I wanted to bring in Ken, who has a lot of experience on both sides of that, to talk about it a little bit more. And before we jump into that, just kind of an overview of what we'll be covering today. So we're going to talk for a little bit about the technical interview, like I said, what that entails, how you can prepare for it. And then we're going to take a look at just kind of coding in general and what's going on with that industry and what it's like as a career, and then how you can learn to program, and what our Firehose program is like. And we're going to give you a kind of sneak peek into some of the lessons as well as the job preparation tracks, and give you some kind of examples of all that. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat in the side of the info session. Marco will be answering some of those, and then you're always welcome to send in questions to questions@thefirehoseproject.com, and we'll get back to you on that. So let's dive right in. We'll start firing away some questions for Ken. So let's, I guess, just take a look at what does a technical interview entail? I know it can be very different from looking at like a sales interview or a business interview or anything like that. So how does it differ, and kind of what goes on in a technical interview?
Yeah, I think it's a super good question. I think thinking about how to prepare yourself best to perform well in a technical interview is one of the essential things to get started. So knowing where you're actually going makes a lot of sense. So there are a couple of different types of technical interviews and different ways people will evaluate your skill as a developer. And that's kind of what the role of the technical interview is. There's some soft skills and things like that matter, but employers really want to make sure that you have the technical chops that sort of you need to actually contribute and be an awesome member of the team. So there's a couple different ways that they can go about doing that. The first version, which is kind of the most traditional way, is using a process that's known as whiteboarding. So what the whiteboarding entails is one of the people on the team ends up asking a technical question. Can you perform some action with code? And it's your job to take a step back, think through the problem, and then go to a whiteboard and actually start writing down some of the code that you would potentially put inside a text editor if you were sitting and coding on a computer, but you're using like a whiteboard pen and a whiteboard. So that's the first method, which is the most traditional and kind of the most long-standing and one of the more common ways. Lately in industry, it's slowly becoming more and more common to give people homework assignments. So basically, can you actually build a project that fits these requirements and sort of set out a spec, and then see what type of work you actually produce. And those types of interviews are pretty good because it helps people actually evaluate your work given sort of like the time that you spend to do it, as opposed to being sort of just up against a whiteboard and having to think on your feet and not having the luxury of being able to Google search and do stuff like that. So it's two different ways, and you're seeing it's more and more common for people to give like practical assignments as opposed to asking you to stand in front of a whiteboard and actually do those problems. But it's really important to be prepared to do both. So regardless of how the employer is going to be interviewing you, it's important that you're prepared either way. So it's good to know about both of those.
Cool. So if I can ask one more question about whiteboarding, given that you're kind of being a little bit put on the spot and you're, standing in front of obviously a whiteboard and not, at your computer and able to like test your code on the spot, do you think potential employers are looking more for like kind of higher level logical thinking, or are they looking for like that you have your code exactly correct, or maybe a bit of both? But was just kind of wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a super good question. Like during the whiteboarding process, what do people actually focus on? The first thing that you're going to want to do when you're actually whiteboarding is make it really clear what your problem solving, what your thought process is, because that's one of the things they want to know the most is like how you break apart problems, how you think about things, and what you're doing there. So that's like the big picture, sort of like how you would tackle the problem. If you have like small little nuances in your code where maybe you spell a variable name wrong, or you have something like a small thing that like it would trip you up if you were running the code in the computer, but like looks pretty close. Most of the time, employers are going to overlook those types of things because you're not using sort of the actual tools. So it's okay to make a couple of sort of small, like nuanced mistakes if you understand the big picture. And probably if you ran that in that code, you'd be able to figure out like what the problem is based on the error message. So basically what they're looking for is big picture, how can you break apart the skill, and what's your thought process. So you really want to be talking about sort of what you're thinking at every stage of the game, as opposed to just being quiet and sort of looking at the whiteboard. Doing things like diagramming and sort of talking through examples and talking about like specific cases and stuff like that is super, super helpful too. But you don't have to get it 100% perfect in most situations, but they want to know that you're going down the right track.
Cool. That's an awesome tip, just to kind of like talk through your thought process as you're doing it. So you can clue them into that. Great. So you kind of started to mention this, but so given that there may be these two types of common technical interview practices, I guess, so the whiteboarding and then the kind of like take-home challenge or homework, how can you best prepare for those as, you know, as a job candidate? I would assume there's probably like some kind of different preparation for each. And so what would you kind of say for each one is the best way to prepare for that?
Yeah, so I think that's a super, super solid question. And thinking about sort of being proactive and being prepared for either scenario is super, super important. So the first type of problem, this like whiteboarding problem, where you're sort of given an arbitrary sort of coding challenge that's like, it's kind of like contained. So it's not like a real world example that sort of has a whole bunch of sort of edge cases and nuance and stuff like that. Sort of like a narrow case. Like one example of a question is determine if a string is a palindrome or not. Something like that, where you can write some code to determine if something has a property or something like that. So the best way to prepare for those types of questions is to just do a bunch of different ones that increase in complexity. So basically what that's called is coding kata, which is a term for basically coding challenges, or basically just like a challenge exercises that you can work with the programming language to solve. So the more that you do, the more prepared you'll be and the more comfortable you'll be. So we suggest that you do, we have a number of coding challenges on our platform. And doing those helps our students prepare for the whiteboarding exercises, because in order to solve a lot of these, you have to actually understand how to break down a problem. You have to understand how to take the first step and how to do that. So the first step is being able to do that in the context of like your actual coding environment. The next step is being able to go on the whiteboard and do it. As like an intermediate step, sometimes we suggest that people use like a Google Doc or some other type of like a medium to write code on that's a little bit less comfortable than a text editor that you've been writing code in, because having the syntax highlighting and having all the sort of like the bells and whistles of your text editor isn't something that you're going to have during the whiteboarding exercises. So the first step is just being able to solve these problems on your own inside a text editor and actually solve the problems. From there, being able to solve it in a little bit of an uncomfortable environment like a Google Doc. And then the final stage is just going up against the whiteboard and sort of being asked a question and being able to sort of start writing some code on the whiteboard. So that's how we generally suggest people prepare.
Cool, yeah, and so we'll definitely take a look at some of those coding challenges in our platform a little bit later in the info session, so you can kind of see what some of those look like. Great, so I guess that being said, like, how do you know if you are prepared for a technical interview?
Yeah, I think it's a hard question to know if you are prepared or not. I think most people probably don't feel like that. You'll never feel 100% like I feel great about sort of going in and being judged against other people and sort of potentially going down those situations. But if you're able to solve the types of problems that like are difficult that we have on our platform, and you actually can solve coding challenges that just are not very simple, that have a lot of like complexity to them. If you can do that in inside a text editor and you're able to actually solve the actual problem that you're facing at the beginning, after you do a number of them, you'll feel more and more prepared as far as that goes. So you'll never feel 100%, but you have to just go out and sort of get the experience. Interviewing is something that is a lot like coding itself, which is something that you learn by doing. So by going on the interviews and actually going on the whiteboard and sort of doing these things, you get easier and easier, and it's a lot less stressful, and it feels less strange to be up against a whiteboard talking about code that you're writing sort of on the spot with a magic marker. But that's my thoughts about that.
Cool. So it sounds like kind of maybe like some repetition until your comfort level gets a little bit higher, both with just practicing challenges and then just going after various interviews and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Nice. So one thing I know that some students who graduate from boot camps are, curious about or concerned about is just like how to speak to your experience, given that maybe you had a completely different career previously and then went through a boot camp, versus like someone who, has a CS degree or has some previous coding experience. So how can students, like particularly from the Firehose project, kind of speak to their experience, and highlight their strengths and stuff like that in a technical interview if they've just graduated from a boot camp?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways that you can present yourself. I think a lot of times some people come from technical fields that aren't necessarily coding. I think if you can make parallels between coding and whatever your experience is elsewhere, that can be potentially helpful. But even if you're just starting fresh and it's your first career, one of the best things that you can do is just to have a side project. So a side project is just something that you're working on, sort of that you're building for the sake of building out the project, and it can show that you're passionate about development because you're spending your free time working on projects and building things out and sort of thinking about features and thinking about how you can solve these problems, and then just talking about it. And I think talking about projects that you've worked on, especially projects that you're really passionate about, if you feel really excited about a project that you're working on, that's one of the best things that you can do, because employers are really looking for people that are passionate about web development, not just doing it for the sake of doing it. So finding a side project that you can actually genuinely be excited about, spending the time to actually build it out, and then taking that and just talking about your experience and maybe the next features that you're going to add, some of the experience of adding other features, things that you learned from the process of building it out. All that stuff is really great for coding bootcamp grads to do, to actually just showcase what you've actually done and talk about what you've actually done.
Awesome. Yeah. I know we've had students build out some really awesome kind of side projects, and that's always been a really cool thing for them to share with future or potential employers. So one of the other things that we do in our program is the Agile Team Project, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And that, is also something that you can definitely speak to, and that really helps. So could you maybe touch on that for just a minute about how like the Agile Team Project as well, and just kind of having that experience can help when you're applying for a job on a dev team, and maybe how you could speak to that in an interview?
Yeah, that's another thing that I think is super, super valuable, being able to talk about working with other developers on a team and just going through the same flow that is used at actual companies and stuff too. It gives you that type of an experience. So like there's many experiences on the team project that it makes a ton of sense to highlight on technical interviews, talking about how you use Git and GitHub to collaborate with other people, talking about experiences working with other developers and giving code reviews. So that's having you looking at somebody else's code and giving them constructive criticism, talking about having other developers look at your code and give you constructive criticism, and talking about how you split up the work and sort of like a fair share of the work, but also work with other people to help them out too, doing things like pair programming. All that stuff is really common on the actual job. So being able to talk from the experience of actually working on a real team, it's something that is definitely worth talking about. in the context of a technical interview too. So don't forget to sort of highlight the fact that you've worked with other developers, you know how to do it, you know what the workflow is, you know how to use the tools. Like you're already prepared to work on the team because you've already worked on a different team using all the same tools that the companies are using. So definitely worth highlighting that on a technical interview too.
Cool. So I guess to leave us off, you've definitely probably touched on a bunch of these, but if you could kind of think of one or a couple big like technical interview do's and don'ts, do you have any of those that you can share with the people who are joining us?
Yeah, so I've been on both sides of the technical interview, so I've seen sort of as the person conducting the technical interview, I've definitely seen many of the sort of do's and don'ts in action. One of the biggest don'ts, I think the don'ts is one of the things that I think is most interesting because it's something that sort of you could potentially be hurting yourself by doing something, so preventing yourself from doing that makes a lot of sense. One of the worst things that I've seen people do, which is kind of crazy, but it actually happens. Some people are presented like challenges or asked questions and they just refuse to answer it. And that's like a major don't. So if somebody's asking you like a technical question, how would you do X, Y, and Z? Either like attempt to answer the question, say, I'm not 100% sure, but put the person giving the interview, don't say something along the lines of, yeah, I know that, but I don't have the time, energy to tell you about it. It's something that you probably wouldn't expect that actually happens, but it does happen quite a bit. So the do is always be proactive, always be helpful, be thoughtful. If somebody asks you a question, take a minute to really think about it, give a really thoughtful answer, don't dismiss people, just try to be as present, as productive, and as helpful with the answers as you do have. One of the big do's that I would say is thinking about other situations that you might have similar knowledge if you don't have the actual knowledge. So we wrote a blog post about this in the past. It's what we call the know what rule. So basically, if somebody asks you if you have experience with one thing, but you don't, you can oftentimes find something that's pretty close and make that comparison. So if somebody asked me, do you have experience with X? I could say, no, but I do have experience with Y, which is pretty similar. And then talk about sort of your experience with that and come at it from a really positive standpoint where you're like, this is sort of, this is how I can show you with confidence that I can pick this up pretty quickly. Because you're not necessarily expected to always know all of the answers, but you're expected to be the type of person who's willing to learn whatever it takes to sort of get the job done. So trying to showcase that aspect as opposed to actually just doing the opposite and just being like, yeah, I know the answer, but I don't want to tell you, which is kind of crazy, but I've seen that happen a number of times actually, given technical interviews, and those candidates usually don't get very far.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, as you're kind of going through all those points, I know we've talked about like, you're not necessarily expected to know every single thing that's going to be thrown at you, but if you can show how you start to think about approaching it or how you would learn it or how you could, tie in other resources, that's sometimes just as valuable because it shows, on the job, you're going to have to do the same thing. So awesome. Those are great tips. And so I think, another thing is we'll dive into a little bit of the job preparation that we have on our platform and take a peek at some of those lessons later in the info session. So we'll start to see even more. We have tons of interview do's and don'ts and tips and practice things. So we'll dive into that as well. But that was great, Ken. Thank you so much for joining.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I'll talk to you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry about that. If anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat or send them to questions@thefirehoseproject.com. And we will continue on. So if this kind of topic is interesting to you, you're probably thinking about, getting into a career of coding, thinking about that technical interview. If you've gotten that far down the thought process, it can sometimes be a bit daunting. And, it kind of seems like this hurdle that's way far out. So hopefully what someone Ken told you about and spoke to today kind of helps put it in perspective of, what potential employers are looking for, more kind of logical thinking and how you think through things and being able to be resourceful and showing a desire to learn and all of that. So hopefully that was helpful. So if you're kind of thinking about this, then thinking about getting into coding and like why you might want to get into coding, why is it important and relevant? So coding right now, I think, is more important and relevant than ever. So there's a saying that software is eating the world, and I think it's definitely more true now than ever, and is going to continue to grow. So if you look at the technologies that we have developed over the past 5 or 10 years, and then the technologies that we're developing now and thinking 5 or 10 years in the future, almost every industry is going to be involved in some type of programming and software. So right now, if you're looking at that, we've got things like, we've got Tesla and SpaceX, and we've got companies working on autonomous cars, and we've got all these like very kind of futuristic seeming things that are very heavily dependent on programming and software. And then we've also got, more kind of traditional industries or careers that also are including software. So we've got companies that are looking to automate things and be more efficient. Every company almost now has a website or a web app. So looking at like healthcare, looking at financial industry, looking at, travel. So looking at Airbnb, Yelp, stuff like that. Those are all web apps that require full stack development because that's an interactive site that you're using. So if you think about, all of those types of sites that you're engaging with every day and the ones that are just going to continue, it's just a booming industry, and there's going to be a huge demand. There already is, and there's going to continue to be a huge demand for these types of roles. So basically, the possibilities of programming and code are pretty endless if you're looking at kind of the diversity of different industries and career paths that you can get into. So as kind of an individual looking into this and thinking about possibly, starting a career in programming, what might that be like? So I think there's a lot of people get nervous that maybe, if they're not as strong in math or sciences or something like that, or, haven't necessarily always been great with computers. I think that's kind of a common misconception. And actually the people who tend to be great programmers are those who really enjoy like puzzles and problem solving, critical thinking, and really kind of looking at problems and challenges and breaking them apart and thinking through that. So I think it's actually a lot less kind of mathy than many people think. And it's really about, that day-to-day of being a programmer is about addressing kind of challenges and problems and opportunities with code. And how can I address this with the skill set that I have? And as I was just saying, that skill set is becoming more and more relevant to address all these kind of opportunities and problems now and in the future. So in that sense, coding is actually really creative because you're looking at, these ways that you can address like these ideas and creating new things and new ways to do so, and really kind of tinkering with that and figuring out how you can find solutions there. So a bunch of our students have created really awesome apps and websites and, relevant to today and businesses that they've started. So if you're interested in checking out any of those, shoot us an email at questions@thefirehoseproject.com and we'll send you some examples. It's always fun to see things that our students and our alumni have been building out. And yeah, we'd be happy to share that and give you some inspiration. So if you're thinking that this all sounds good and this might be a career opportunity that you're interested in, how do you get there? So there's obviously a bunch of different ways. The Firehose project is an online coding bootcamp that teaches full stack development. So we're teaching you how to build, web apps that have both a user interface, and then we're also teaching you how to work on like the back end, so with data and algorithms, and so it's this interactive website that users engage with. So taking a look at our bootcamp and kind of what we do and what we teach, it makes sense to kind of step back a little bit and actually look at how we got started. So our co-founders, Ken and Marco, so Ken, who is just with us, and Marco, I think, is probably chatting with some of you all in the chat, have a background in education and a technical background, and actually started teaching in-person intensive boot camps. And so we were teaching the Firehose course at a kind of condensed intensive version at a bunch of different places. We were teaching at Harvard, Babson, Brown, Carnegie Mellon, RISD, the list goes on, and teaching these courses and getting really quick feedback on kind of how students learn best, and how we can explain things so that it really clicks, and how we can provide the right content at the right time. So we were able to, by teaching in person, get this quick feedback loop on it. Once you get to this point, it makes a lot of sense to start learning about, writing tests into your software, or to learn about object-oriented programming. And so we have a really good sense based on that, and we're able to translate that into an online program. And what that means is, because it's online, you're able to move at your own pace and benefit from getting that content and getting that support when it makes the most sense for you. So as you're working through the program, you'll be completing lessons, and you're checking off the lessons that you've completed, and submitting your work for review and going through challenges. And we're able to, at the right time, provide the right content or direct you to an overview video that's going to explain a bigger concept that's going to kind of help tie everything together. So we really have a way to provide the right content at the right time, while allowing you to move at your own pace and on your own schedule. So you're not going to be tied to kind of the pace of the slowest person in the room. You're going to be able to move ahead faster if you're picking up the concepts really well, or if you have more time to devote to programming or practicing. But then you'll also be able to get the support that you need if you're getting challenged with something, or if you're moving a little bit slower. And so we'll talk about that support in just a minute. I think another kind of benefit of the online program and the online model is we're able to have students from all different kind of schedules and backgrounds and time zones, is that you get a really diverse community of Firehose students and mentors, and the Firehose team itself. So we're able to have people from all different time zones. We have students all over the US as well as internationally, and you're able to really benefit from having all of those different perspectives and backgrounds, and everybody kind of comes from a different background. So we have students that are full-time parents. We have students that have worked in IT or kind of tech that's not necessarily programming. We have students that have worked as warehouse managers, or in admin roles. So all of those backgrounds have a really unique kind of perspective that these students are able to bring to the program. And that's honestly one of the greatest things about our program is our students and the community that they build, and what everybody, as an individual really brings and adds to the program. So as a Firehose student, you're able to engage with all these different diverse kind of students and perspectives and communities, and really benefit from that. So not only will you have that community of students, and so you'll be able to engage with them in our Slack channel and our community page. So we actually have a feature that will show, and we kind of show you some of the lessons where you can see who's coding in the lesson that you're working on, and actually find them on Slack and chat with them. So you will always be able to kind of chat with various students. But you'll also get support. It's one of our biggest ways to kind of provide technical support is actually at the forum at the bottom of each lesson, which you'll see in the free bootcamp prep course. So most of you have signed up for that. If you haven't, definitely do so on our site. And so you'll work through some HTML and CSS if you haven't already done that. And then you'll actually start writing some simple programs in Ruby and submit your challenges. And we'll give you code reviews and feedback. And if you get stuck, we have a forum at the bottom of each lesson that's monitored by our Firehose engineers and ambassadors. And so we get you really quick response times with technical help. And it's a great kind of medium for that help, because you can actually copy and paste in your code or take a screenshot, and we can look at exactly what you're working on and see if maybe you're just getting tripped up on a typo, or if maybe you need some kind of bigger help if something's out of place or out of order, and that's why your code's not running. So we can really take a look at that and get you help so that you're not stuck spinning your wheels, because as you're learning, it can be really, really frustrating if you're still trying to pick up the concepts and maybe have a typo, an extra comma or something like that. And that's why you're getting stuck, but you don't necessarily have the skill or the practice yet to find that. And so you're not sure what's wrong, and it can be super frustrating. And we don't want you to get stuck because of that type of reason. So we have the forum. That's always a great way to get really quick help as you're going through the lessons and practicing coding. And then, of course, we have our mentors who are amazing, and we work with them really closely to kind of onboard them and select them. So all of our mentors have years of coding experience and are also great at working with students and new programmers. And so as a Firehose student, you'll get matched one-on-one with a mentor, and you'll meet with them regularly, and that's a great opportunity to go through kind of larger concepts that you've been learning and practice those, anything that might be challenging It's a great opportunity to pair program with a senior developer, with someone that has a lot of experience, which is something that we spoke about in a previous info session. And that's something that as a new developer, you'll do most likely on your new team, is pair program with a senior developer as you're getting used to their code base and their workflow and stuff like that. So you'll get that experience of pair programming with your mentor. That's a great way to go through challenges and practice concepts in your mentor sessions. And then obviously the mentors just have years of industry experience and can really help kind of bring you to that next level of becoming a developer, of someone that they would want to potentially hire, the same standard of someone that they would hire on their team. So the mentorship is a huge part of the program as well. And that's going to be more of a regularly scheduled thing where you can talk about kind of bigger concepts and really helping you get to the next level each week as you're working through the lessons. And then another key component is that we do have weekly office hours that Ken and Marco host. So you'll get to kind of dial in and hang out somewhat similar to this. And you'll get to chat with Ken and Marco, ask any questions that you had that have come up throughout the week. You can also, see other students put faces to names, hear their questions, hear their experience. It's a really great time just to kind of engage with the community and get any questions answered and kind of talk a little bit more about what you're working on. So that's weekly, offers just a bit more support, a bit, another way to meet other students and really kind of network and engage there. And then, of course, the code review. So as you're working through your apps, we're going to be reviewing your challenges and your codes, your code for your apps, and giving you any feedback, just like we do in the bootcamp prep course. So giving you any feedback on how you can make your code better or more efficient, obviously if it's not running, what you need to work on there. So we're going to be giving you regular code review, and that's really beneficial as well to be able to get a more experienced engineer reviewing your code and just showing you little ways that you can tweak it to make it more efficient and cleaner, better code. And then in the last 8 weeks of the program, you'll have the option to work on the Agile Team Project, which Ken and I just spoke briefly about, which is a huge part of that helps our students get jobs and a great thing to speak about in the technical interview, because you're going to be able to work on a team of students that is led by a Firehose mentor. So it totally simulates a dev team experience where you've got, the Firehose mentor acting as the team lead or the head of engineering, and you're working on a much larger kind of project, and really looking at that project and the objective and going through the whole process of breaking it down into smaller actionable kind of pieces and communicating with your team on who's going to do what, and working on a schedule that you would similar to a dev team. So working on kind of a sprint cycle and having weekly stand-ups and talking about what you've been working on the previous week and what's what any blockers you might have and what you're going to be working on the next week. And so that experience, you'll additionally get kind of weekly meetings and support and working with other students and a Firehose mentor as your team lead as well. So that's the last 8 weeks of the program. So kind of going into what our full program and curriculum entails briefly. And I'll just kind of touch on a lot of this. If you have not already signed up again for the free bootcamp prep course, you should definitely do so. Because once you're signed up, you'll see a preview full program up at the top of the screen. And you'll be able to look through our curriculum, all the things that you're working on, and the apps that you'll build out as well. So you'll get a hint of, or I guess you'll get a preview of kind of the apps that you'll build out, and what kind of features you're learning how to build, and you'll start to be able to see how that relates to the apps that you might use in your everyday life. You can also check out our curriculum online at thefirehoseproject.com/curriculum. So we talk a lot about kind of our teaching style and the different projects that you'll work on there. But so our program starts off with our free bootcamp prep course, which I've mentioned a couple times now, and most of you have already started. And so we teach some HTML, CSS. You'll build out a custom portfolio page where you can then put your code. And you can build out a splash page for that within the first hour. So make something really nice that kind of shows, a little bio and work with some images and CSS there. And then you'll jump right into writing some Ruby programs. So you'll write 3 programs that we will be teaching you kind of these coding concepts along the way, and then ask you to submit your code for review. And we'll review your code, like I was saying, give you any feedback, let you know how it could be better. And then once it's looking good, we'll give you the thumbs up on that. And once you have the thumbs up on all 3 of those challenges, we can officially accept you into our full program. And so we start students in the full program every Monday, so you never have to wait too long to keep coding or get started. And so once you pick your Monday start date, you'll dive right in, and you're going to start building out your first app. And so your first app is going to be a online quotes generator. So it takes user input, it stores it in a database, and it displays it back on an interface. So you're already starting to work with those, with like data structures and front end, back end, full stack programming. And so as you go through our course, you're going to be building out several different apps. You'll build 5 apps from scratch, from the ground up, going through the whole development process. And as we're teaching you those skills, we're also focusing really heavily on computer science fundamentals. So we're teaching MVC architecture, object-oriented programming, test-driven development, so how to write really good tests into your software, focusing a lot on algorithms and data structures. And these are the types of things that give you a really, really solid foundation as a programmer, so that you kind of become unstoppable, and you can go any direction you choose because you have this solid foundation and you're learning how to continue learning. The best developers definitely never stop learning, always interested in kind of new technologies and how to improve their skill set, how to do new things. So we want you to be that type of programmer. And so we're giving you this really solid foundation that's widely applicable across a number of programming languages and technologies, stuff like that. That being said, we do teach Ruby on Rails and JavaScript in our program. So you will work with both programming languages. You'll build apps in each one. So you'll have that experience with 2 different programming languages that you're building on top of this solid foundation. So you're going to be diving right into that off the bat. And we take a very kind of hands-on, learn by doing approach. So you're going to be, as we're teaching you these skills, you're going to be building out your code. You're going to be getting reviews, getting mentor sessions, support along the way. And so you're really learning by doing and by taking these concepts that we're teaching you and applying them. And so we'll be teaching you these concepts, and you're going to be applying them. And so you'll go through the lessons and start building out your apps. And we're going to slowly start taking off the training wheels as you become more self-sufficient and learn how to look up information that you need and how to problem solve and troubleshoot and stuff like that. And so the way that we do that is by having coding challenges. So we'll give you challenges throughout the course. What Ken was saying, these are also a great way to prepare for technical interviews. These are the types of challenges that'll get you really more comfortable with thinking on your feet and having things kind of thrown at you and picking it apart and thinking through it logically. So you'll have these coding challenges that you'll work on, and that's really what kind of helps you take everything that you're learning and doing in the program and put it into a new environment where we've kind of removed the training wheels, and asking you to apply that on your own. And so that also really kind of simulates, working on a team and having a new project given to you, or working with a client and getting kind of rough details, a rough, agenda or request, and figuring out how to think through that. So I'll show you what some of those look like in our lessons shortly. And that's kind of our teaching style, is having that very kind of hands-on, teach by doing, real world experience, and then making sure that we're giving you challenges that you are thinking on your feet and applying that, and really seeing how you can approach new problems that come down the way, come down the line, and feel comfortable with that. So not, we don't want you to have that feeling like, oh, I can only do it because I was following the lessons. Like, that's not going to get you very far. We want to give you that teach you how to fish education so that you can continue to learn and continue to be a really strong programmer. And so, yeah, I think the Agile Team Project is really also what kind of ties that all together, and is going to, you're going to have a much more complex project. So you're actually going to build out a chess app, which most students get a little bit nervous. Maybe they haven't played chess in a while, don't remember all the rules. That's okay. And so you'll build out a chess app, which, if you start to think about it, if you know anything about chess, has a lot of rules, and has, if you're thinking about playing it online on a computer, all the things that you'd have to kind of think through and program in. So different pieces move in different ways, and how to write in rules that validate that you're moving a piece legally and confirm, that you're not moving the king into checkmate. or into check at all, and then how to confirm that it is checkmate. So if you think about all these things that you're going to have to think through the logic of programming that in, it becomes pretty complex pretty quickly. So you're going to take that and work with your team to address that. And that's kind of the ultimate, like pulling the training wheels off, working collaboratively, and really getting that real world experience of developing in that type of environment. So at this point, let's take a look at some of the lessons. I know probably some of you are interested in really looking at what our platform and program looks like. So we'll switch to taking a peek at some of these. And just one moment. And take a look at what a Firehose lesson looks like. So we'll make this big. So this is our lesson platform. We'll get back up to the top here. So again, this is going to look pretty familiar if you've started the bootcamp prep course. If you haven't, run over to our website and get started for free, and we'll give you the code review and some practice and more of a preview of kind of how our program works. So a couple of things you'll notice. Obviously, I was mentioning the program is, online and self-paced. So you can do the program at your own schedule, but we do have a 22-week or a 42-week program. So we're going to give you some goals and some ways to hold yourself accountable and make sure you're staying on track. So one of them up here is this progress bar. You're going to be able to see how much you've completed, and it's going to let you know if you're behind or need to catch up a little bit. We're also going to have goals over here. So these are the next things that you should work on. And you can literally go in and check these off once you've done them. And so you'll see they're all different kinds of things. We do have a combination of curriculum formats, which we'll show you in just a moment. And so you can also go ahead and see some more goals as well. So you can see what's coming up in your pipeline of lessons and make sure you're ready and excited for that as well. So you'll be able to check off all these lessons as you go through. And then these are what we call our lesson tracks. And so this here is the bootcamp prep course, which I've been talking about. And then once you start the full program, you'll have access to these tracks. This is the quote generator that I mentioned. So in your first week, you're going to build out this quotes generator. I'm not going to get too much into detail because, as I mentioned, you can take a look at all of these and what you'll kind of be working on and which features you'll learn how to build in our preview the full program section. But I want to show you what a lesson actually looks like, because that is something that we can give you a sneak peek here in the info session. So let's take a look at this lesson track. So it's building out a Yelp clone. And so basically what you're going to be doing is working with like a location-based kind of review platform. So you're going to be working with a Google Maps API. You can see here user comments, star ratings. You're going to be able to log in. And so you're going to need to know how to manage all of that data, work with algorithms to effectively, use the data. So those are the types of things you'll be working on in this track. So actually, I think I have it pulled up over here. So this is at the beginning. Let's take a look at some of the lessons a little bit further down. So let's see. Like if we take a look at this lesson here, so this is building out a certain feature of making a rating drop down. So we're teaching you how to build out some features. You're going to notice it's a text-based curriculum mostly. The reason why we do that is because as a developer, you're going to be as you're working on new projects or working with a new API or something like that, you're going to be getting written instruction. And so it's really good to get comfortable with working through that written documentation as you're learning how to code. Again, we always want to teach you kind of this real world scenario and how it works as a developer. So you'll see, the curriculum is kind of text-based, which you'll also see in the bootcamp prep course. So it does totally, give you that kind of preview. So as you're working through this, you'll see we've got the forum. If we go way down, a bunch of people are asking questions. You can ask any questions here in the forum, copy and paste your code, attach a screenshot, and we'll get back to you really quick. We have some pro tips here. And so that is kind of what a typical lesson looks like. And then as Ken and I were discussing before, we also have these challenges that you can work on. So let's take a look at some of the challenges here. These are the types of things that really kind of help us teach you by taking off the training wheels, and also help you by getting these skills and getting comfortable with the types of things that you might encounter in the technical interview. So, these are definitely hard. They're not easy. They're meant to be challenging. But we give you a little pep talk in the beginning, and we'll give you kind of all the information that you need. And then we're also going to give you a couple hints. No, I won't hover for too long because I don't want to give anything away. But we'll give you a couple pointers if you're getting stuck. And these are the types of things that you're also welcome to work with your mentor on. And you can pair program and, talk through some things that might be tripping you up there. So that is kind of another thing that we have throughout our curriculum that really asks you to apply all the things that you're learning and get really comfortable with using them. And then we also have videos here, which you'll see. So on the side we have a whole bunch of videos for all different types of things that we're wanting to teach that might be kind of better overview concepts that are kind of larger concepts that are best kind of talked through. So we'll have these different video lessons. And at certain points, as you're working through the curriculum, as I was mentioning, we'll say, hey, now's a good time to go check out, the object-oriented programming video 4 on instance variables. And that's going to help you kind of tie together all these pieces. So we also have videos where we're teaching you kind of bigger concepts as well. So these are in each lesson track as you're working through and kind of giving you that additional content or curriculum style as well. So let's go back to, oops, I went into the lessons. Let's go back to the dashboard here. We'll look at a couple other things. So one of the things that I mentioned was we do have these job preparation lessons. And so we'll take a look at those as well. So our job prep, and you can also see more details on the job prep in the preview the full program from the free bootcamp prep course. But I want to show you what some of these lessons look like. And so basically our job prep lessons were built out with a lot of feedback from technical recruiters and hiring managers. And we partnered with different companies to like brand yourself. So it's online reputation management. So there's a lot of really amazing tools in here. And basically we created all these lessons that are actionable tasks that help you go out and get a job as a developer as you're nearing the end of the program or after you've graduated. And so you do have lifetime access to all of the current curriculum, including these job prep lessons. So it just acts as this great resource as you continue your career as a developer. So we start from the beginning of how to structure your job search, how to set it up like a sales funnel, and really just get after your job search in a really efficient and effective way. And then we're going to dive into more detailed things. So here's one, reverse engineering the interview. Going to be some do's and don'ts, tips, stuff like that, like Ken and I spoke about today. So let's take a look at some of these. I think these are some great lessons here. So you're going to have lessons like how to prepare, how to expect the unexpected, and then we go all the way through like salary negotiation and how to make the most of your first day. So we really go through kind of the full cycle of that job preparation. So let's take a look at a couple more lessons. So you'll kind of see how these are really detailed. So we go into things like writing the cover letter, technical interview 101, interview mistakes. Let's take a look here. Here's one on whiteboarding as well. So we definitely go into more detail in there and make sure you're really prepared. So I'll give you a little sneak peek of some interview mistakes here. So mistake number 1, nobody hires aspiring developers. So this one's talking about how to talk about yourself. So I think this is something that we kind of asked, or I kind of asked Ken earlier in the info session, is how to talk about your experience if you've just graduated from a boot camp. And it's tying it into things that you do have experience with. So obviously, the team project, side projects are great things, and it doesn't have to necessarily be programming related. But I think the key here is to be confident and, don't say, I want to be a programmer, that's why I'm applying for this job. You are a programmer. You've been building out apps. You're passionate about it at this point. You're going after jobs. So speak about yourself confidently. Make sure you're paying attention to the language that you're using, because that does make a big difference in an interview. So there's our first tip. There's a lot more in here. That's something you'll get access to later on in the program as you kind of get a little bit closer to graduation. And then lastly, we do have these advanced courses, which are something new from the Firehose project. So let's take a look at those. So the advanced topics, excuse me. So these are topics that you can purchase on a monthly subscription, and there are additional lessons on frameworks and things that you can really continue learning as you're looking for jobs or in your first job as a developer. And these are things that a lot of our students have been asking for and really interested in learning. So things like ES6 and React deep dive and things like that. So you can take a look at those on our website as well. And these are things that basically take you from the boot camp to the next level of learning new technologies consistently, just becoming a really solid programmer that's constantly learning, constantly looking for new kind of technologies and opportunities as well. So that is kind of our preview of the platform. So with that, we'll kind of go back and just take a look at everything we just talked about. I know I covered a lot, probably talked really fast, gave myself a coughing attack. But yeah, so kind of what sets the Firehose project apart, what we really focus on in our program. So definitely a couple different things. In terms of the curriculum, the heavy focus on computer science fundamentals, giving you a really solid foundation so that you can continue to go on and learn new things and take on any problem, any challenge that's thrown at you, because you know how to approach things with a logical thinking and problem solving mindset. So definitely, the depth of the curriculum, focusing on computer science fundamentals, algorithms, and then also just our kind of in-person background of that teaching style and how to really get you there by providing the right content at the right time. The Agile Team project is a huge part of kind of what sets our program and our students apart as they go out to apply for jobs. So being able to speak to that experience and just having that experience of working with other developers. All the best products are built by teams. So if you're looking to work for an awesome company that has an awesome product or service, you're probably going to be applying for a role on a team. And having some of that experience is really going to help you out both in getting the role and in just hitting the ground running and knowing how to communicate effectively and be a great member of that team. One of the other kind of key components and really important parts is our coordinated support. So making sure that both you have support, in kind of the nitty-gritty technical stuff in the forum, so that you don't get stuck spinning your wheels, you don't get caught up by a typo or, something if you're coding and, just can't quite figure something out and you need a little bit of help. We've got the forum there, got your back. And then we also have our really experienced mentors that you're meeting with regularly in our office hours. And that's a way to kind of talk about larger concepts, things that are challenging you, pair program with a mentor, and really take your ability to the next level. And then just kind of lastly, our community of students is something that really sets us apart, and we love so much and are so proud of, and kind of all the different things that they're doing, and you get to engage with that. So before I start coughing again, thank you so much for joining. Definitely send any questions to questions@thefirehoseproject.com. And we will see you later and have a great rest of the evening, and join our free bootcamp prep course if you haven't already. We'll look forward to seeing some of your code, giving you some feedback, and hopefully seeing you in the program. Thanks. Bye.